The next scene cuts to Jie, who's wondering if he made it to the studio okay. The guard asks if she's talking about Jin, and she confirms. The guard then explains that he received word that Jin has actually made into the studio without any hitch. Jie then asks if sending him there was a good decision since he hasn't fully recovered. The guard says it's all right, pointing out that threats and stalkers are pretty common for celebrities. With Seo Ha-cha's level of fame, she's had her fair share of them. Her agency recently assigned a personal bodyguard for her, so Jin won't be too busy. Jie agrees, explaining that this is precisely why she sent him there, to let him take it easy while he recovers. And who knows, he might even complain about how boring it is. The guard then smiles at Jie and says he doesn't think Jin is the type to let himself get bored. Jie finds this good news and uses the term cakewalk to emphasize how easy this job is going to be for Jin. The guard reluctantly agrees, saying she's precisely right. Jie, on the other hand, feels proud of herself for using Gen Z slang, which makes the guard awkward as he watches her bask in her own sense of accomplishment. As people are gathering in for the shoot, we also see the gorilla making another appearance. Despite the hottest actress sitting right before them, everyone's attention seems to be fixed on Jin, as they can't take their eyes off him. The big man then asks Jin why he left his post for so long, saying they're not here on a field trip. Jin replies that he was scanning the perimeter. The cocky guy starts fuming, questioning what kind of perimeter Jin is talking about, and what a kid like him could possibly know about this stuff. Suddenly, the director wraps up the shooting. As everyone is taking a moment of respite, Seo Ha-cha's assistant offers her some water. Just as she's about to take a sip, her attention is grabbed by Jin, who announces loudly that he needs everyone to remain inside. The entire staff is all ears after hearing this request, and Jin continues, saying that the police will be arriving soon, and everyone in the studio must cooperate with the investigation. The actress is now thoroughly confused and asks what's actually going on. Jin then shows her an envelope with a tiny camera inside. She asks Jin what this is, and he explains that it's a spy camera he found in the waiting room. The news hits like a thunderbolt out of the blue, shocking both the gorilla and the actress's assistant, as well as the actress herself. Even the people standing all around start murmuring, wondering how a spy camera ended up hidden in her waiting room. The actress begins to tremble, and Jin continues, saying he checked the surveillance footage but didn't find any security cameras at the entrance of the waiting room. This makes it difficult to figure out who installed the spy camera. As usual, the gorilla is fuming, berating Jin for not revealing this sooner, but Jin doesn't give a damn about the gorilla's rage. He continues, saying that Ms. Cha didn't use the waiting room after he found the camera. He was just waiting so as not to disrupt the shoot, and no one has entered the room to retrieve the camera, nor has anyone left the studio. The gorilla's frustration reaches its peak. His nerves are practically popping out, and his mind is on the brink of exploding, and he's convinced Jin is trying to screw him over. He tries to snatch the camera from Jin's hand, demanding he hand it over. But Jin just steps back with such a nonchalant flair that it's almost unbelievable. The gorilla, clearly fed up, asks Jin what the hell he's trying to pull. Jin just says it'd be best if Miss Cha's assistant took the camera. The gorilla turns to the assistant and demands he let him take the camera so he can have his team stage it with the police. The poor assistant, clearly flustered, hesitates but eventually agrees. The gorilla snatches the camera from Jin's hand without a second thought, and everyone around is pretty unsettled by how this giant guy is throwing his weight around. As they step outside, the gorilla starts laying into Jin, asking why he didn't come to him first with something like this. Jin shoots back, wondering why he should have, especially since the gorilla had already said he did a thorough investigation when Jin asked if he'd checked the waiting room. The gorilla's rage hits a new level as he demands to know if Jin was aware of the camera when they spoke earlier. Jin confirms he was. This sends the gorilla into overdrive, yelling at Jin for not immediately reporting to his superiors. Jin makes it crystal clear that the gorilla is not his superior, and that's the last straw. The gorilla tries to slap Jin around, but Jin's not the kind of kid to just take that. He quickly stops the gorilla in his tracks. Fuming, the gorilla finally backs off, muttering that Jin would have been dead if it weren't for SW Corporation. Later, we see the van speeding down the highway. Inside, the lady and her assistant are having a chat. She asks how long it's going to take to figure out who planted that camera. The assistant says the forensic team is on it and should have some answers soon, but the lady isn't so sure. She mentions that they seem to think she was overreacting about something as little as this camera. The big man, ever the reassuring presence, tells her not to worry. He insists he will run his own investigation into the matter. While the actress looks sad and all, Jin glances at her but doesn't say anything. When they arrive at her home, she gets out of the car and Jin follows, but the assistant tells him to stay in the car as he'll drop Jin off at the nearest station. Jin, however, says he'll head back on his own. With the final exchange of goodbyes, the assistant drives off, leaving Jin standing there. Once the car is out of sight, Jin walks around the actress's house. That's when we see her sneaking out of her own house, wearing a mask and a cap. As soon as she steps out, she finds herself startled by the presence behind her and looks around, finding him standing by her side. She quickly asks how he's still there, and Jin simply responds that he was just scanning the area. She gets a bit embarrassed and tells Jin that he can go home since she's just heading to the convenience store around the corner, and asks if she's not allowed to do that. Jin responds that she's free to do whatever she wishes, and that's exactly why he's here. The girl lights up at this, and later, we see her enjoying some delicious noodles outside the convenience store. She tells Jin not to just sit there but to dig in too. She mentions that she was going to take the noodles home but decided to eat them outside since he's here. She looks down and admits that when she's really stressed, she likes to unwind and stroll around the neighborhood. She's been in the business for so long that it's hard to walk around anywhere freely, and she hasn't had time for friends either. She then asks Jin what he does for fun with his friends. He replies that he sometimes goes to the game room after school. She then asks Jin again if he actually mentioned a game room. Jin confirms that he did, which leaves her shocked, because it suddenly feels like she's talking to a teenager again. While Jin is sitting there, he spots some familiar faces, and they are his friends, who are absolutely blown away to see him hanging out with the infamous actress. Jin stands quietly in the background while the lady waves to them with a pleasant smile.